Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Dial set correctly to USA Prepares. The broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. That's the time we're live. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. And if you'd like to listen 24/7 to the broadcast, 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Kyle is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I think I'm doing a little better than you are. You sound like you might have a little congestion, maybe a little cough, maybe...
I have, yep. Yeah. And, bit of a flu. So,
I'm sorry to hear that.
That's all right. I'm here. I wanted to do the broadcast because these are such important times that we're living in. And it's so important for all of us to be as encouraged as possible, you know, because we were talking a bit earlier off air about how easy it is to get discouraged, you know,
absolutely.
Because there's so many things going wrong. You know, there are a lot of people out there who are, you know, not just a cold or not just a dose of the flu, but really, really seriously sick, who are not just, having a bad time with the local corrupt police, but are actually doing serious time for no good reason in particular. You know,
like Mike Parsons.
That's right. That's exactly who I was thinking of, and I was thinking far out. What for breeding wolf pups, basically. You know, and
which is perfectly legal.
It is disgusting. You know, especially since he's a Native American medicine man. That's part of his culture.
Yes, it is. And by the way, even if it weren't part of his culture, it is perfectly legal to breed wolf hybrid pups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, it's just mind-boggling. And it seems to me as if these people they consciously know what they're doing. They are consciously seeking to impoverish and enslave all of us. That you know, that there's no two ways about it in my mind anymore. But it's very easy to focus on the negative. But this cloud actually has a really, really huge silver lining, which I think I tried to describe in the email earlier. It's making us so much stronger. You know, it's making us so much prepared. But it's you know, it's just we're learning how to do things. We're learning how to do things without them, and in a funny sort of a way, they're actually teaching us how to live without them because they're cutting off our resources. You know, so that we have to live without them. That's
my dad. My dad had a saying, and I'm sure it wasn't his, but he used to say that necessity is the mother of invention. And that was kind of something that the GIs from World War II used to say. And maybe it came from before that. Maybe it came from the guys in World War I who had to be inventive and create technologies to defend, their countries. And, as you said that, we're becoming stronger. I mentioned before on this broadcast that, I've got fields that I need to put lime on. I mean, if it ever would rain again. And I couldn't find anybody to lime the fields. Normally, you'd hire a guy or a gal with a big truck, and they put maybe 8 tons of lime on the truck, and they drive around. I'm talking about something the size of a big dump truck with a spreader on the back, and they would spread the lime. Well, I can't find anybody to do it. So our family bought an old spreader truck. And it probably was used by the highway department at one time to spread salt on the roads. Mm-hmm. And so we've got some welding and, fixing up to do. It's mostly rust-colored. And we're going to be able to spread lime. Now, did I ever go to school to learn how to do it? No. Did I ever think that I'd be spreading lime? Because, years before, 10 years ago, you'd see companies spreading lime. No one does it anymore. It's too hard. It's too dusty. There's not enough money in it, I guess. There's more money sitting behind a keyboard and a screen, than actually doing work. Well, so we bought this truck, and, that's part of, I think, what my father was talking about when he said necessity is the mother of invention. And another little thing that we're doing is, because we're in a drought, and because we're in a drought, now is the time to dig out our ponds and make them deeper, so that if it ever does rain again, we'll be able to hold more water in them. And what happens with ponds is cows will go to drink and they'll go to swim in the ponds. And as they do, they push in the ends of the ponds and they push the dirt that surrounds the ponds into the pond. So they literally over time make the pond shallower. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take our old backhoe, and we have, I guess it would be called an antique backhoe, it's so old. We would take our backhoe and scoop out the pond, but there's a little bit of water left in it. So we're going to buy what's called a trash pump. And a trash pump is a water pump that can pump not only water, but water with debris in it, maybe a little bit of mud. I'm not talking about, pumping household trash. I'm talking about, small amounts of maybe leaves and maybe a little bit of mud. We're going to hook that up, and we're going to then hook it into a manifold that we're going to build out of PVC pipe, and we're going to have 120-foot or 100-foot garden-type hoses spread around the field so that as we pump the water out of the pond, it will irrigate the field slowly. So we'll have about 6 hoses in spread around. So, we're thinking, okay, what do we have that we can use? Hoses. What do we need? A trash pump. What else do we need? Well, we need a manifold. But we have some faucets that we can stick in a manifold if we had one. Okay, so all we have to do is build a manifold out of PVC pipe. So $30 later, we're going to be in the manifold business, and $200 or $180 with a coupon, we're going to have a trash pump. So, and then it'll be available for the next time that we have this type of a problem. So
that's right.
Yes, necessity is the mother of invention, and you're right. We are becoming stronger, but I got to tell you, it's not all that much fun. It's a challenge.
It's not easy,
right?
And the thing is it's actually, as you sit back and you actually watch the process of what's going on, okay, you see them. And they are actually becoming weaker. They're becoming more stupid. They're becoming more brutish, okay? They're becoming more thuggish and more obviously evil as time goes on. And I'm noticing this, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one who's noticing this, okay? They're becoming more and more obviously. I've been saying that they've been an extortion racket for, oh my gosh, probably at least the last 6 or 8 years. Okay, I think, or maybe even 10 years, I don't know, when the penny first started to drop, that they were actually had nothing to do with anything right at all. But as the time has gone on, it's been, really, really interesting to watch them developing in their evil, just to sit back and to say, okay, so, here you are, you against me driving my vehicle down the road without your 30 square inches of aluminium plate bolted to it, okay? But in the meantime, your colleagues can't figure out what to do about, a few hundred Africans who are turning the city of Melbourne upside down as we speak, okay? They rent apartments, multi-million-dollar apartments on Airbnb, and they trash them. Sudanese and Somali immigrants. And they roam the streets and they bash up usually ladies, usually young people, just for something to do. It's not even really that the point of it is robbery anymore. It's just, that this is how they've always behaved in their own country. And they have come from a place which is a hellhole, and this is what they do on a Saturday afternoon or, a Friday evening. And so they come here to our wonderful place, which Melbourne was apparently the world's most livable city, and it's rapidly becoming the world's less livable city. Oh, but none of that matters because Guineith out in the bush doesn't have that 30 square inches of aluminium bolted to a vehicle properly. There's the absurdity of it. It's like, you've got to be kidding me, right?
Yeah, well, and in your email, you used the word Section 8. Section 8 housing.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that when we come back.
That here, Housing Commission.
I'm an expert in Section 8 housing.
Good.
Did you know that?
We'd love to talk about that. Yeah, after the break.
Yeah, we'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs and I are going to talk about Section 8 housing. Now, when I say expert, that's in quotes. Guineith's with us. She's in Australia. And in your email, you talked about Section 8 housing. You want to start this discussion, Guineith, and then I'll tell you what I think I know about it?
Okay. Now, they have something similar here in Australia, which is called Housing Commission, okay? And usually that is specially built houses. Sometimes they get a check from the Housing Commission, or the Housing Commission funds it, okay, which I suppose would be the same as a voucher. Often they are enormous skyscrapers full of apartments, okay? I think that in the United States they would probably be called projects. But, something that I've seen is, there will be a fairly nice area and somebody gets government funding to move into a big house in the nice area when maybe they, don't quite, how can I put this? They don't quite
fit in.
The culture of the area.
They don't fit in.
Would be the kindest way of saying it.
Yeah.
But
right.
they'll get the 6-bedroom house because they're a single mother with 5 children,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a single mother. I live on my own farm. My farm is paid for. I've paid off 2 mortgages in my life. Okay. So, the ground that I stand on is my ground. So it is possible, as a single mother, to, move beyond government help. And with my case, I really wasn't given much of a choice because the government help stopped. And I knew it was going to stop. and I planned for the day when it would stop, so I wasn't caught out when it did stop. But it seems that a lot of these people who are in this situation, they don't seem to think ahead that far. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, would you like me to tell you what I know then about Section 8?
Yep.
Okay. Back in the mid-1980s, I had a job, and I got a new boss. And this boss liked to drink. And on Mondays, he would come in well hungover. I mean, he had a wonderful weekend, maybe didn't remember much of it, but on Monday, he would take it out on Vinny. And I hated it. And so I was watching television. At that time, we had television. And there was a commercial on TV that you can become financially independent by buying real estate. So I had a job that paid me a pretty decent salary, and Mrs. Finelli had a job that paid her a pretty decent salary. And whoever got the most recent raise at that time had the highest income. So we were doing fine. Well, my boss was miserable, and I would go in on Mondays and I would get beat up. And the way I looked at it is, he would say to me, Vinny, I want you to go right. You keep going right, and I'll tell you when to stop. And so I would go right, and he'd ask me later, okay, so where are you? And I'd say, well, I've gone to the right, and here's how far I am. And he'd go, I told you to go to the left. And I'd get beat up. No matter what I did, I get beat up. So I watched this commercial, and I thought, is this possible? Is it literally possible to become financially independent? Now, they didn't say wealthy. They just said that, you could be independent if you followed their plan. And so I decided that I would go to this seminar. It was $495 for Saturday and Sunday, which was pretty expensive back then. But, if you decided that it wasn't for you, you could leave the seminar before noon on Saturday and get all your money back. And I thought, well, how could I lose? I'll go, and if it makes sense, I'll continue. If it doesn't, I'll ask for my money back, and I'll go home. Well, I'll tell you the rest of the story when we come back. And it does deal with Section 8 housing. So we're talking about becoming financially independent and the relationship to Section 8 housing. So I attended this seminar, and it was a large room, probably held maybe 500 or maybe a little bit more people. And it was $495 for a 2-day seminar in the mid-1980s. And the one that I attended was an Al Lowry seminar, A-L, as in Albert. His full name is Albert J. Lowry, Lowry. And so I went to the seminar, and I learned about how they said you could buy real estate with no money down. It seemed kind of foreign to me. As a matter of fact, a lot of things that I learned in that seminar seemed kind of foreign to me. Well, I learned so much during the first half of Saturday that I decided that I was not going to ask for my money back, and I was really excited about what I was learning. And so I stayed Saturday, and I stayed late on Sunday, and I asked questions that the seminar presenter said, wow, no one ever asked that question before. And I was really excited about what I had learned. So I realized that I would have wasted the $495 plus the $100 in extra books that I bought, roughly $600 total for the weekend. If I didn't buy real estate, I would have wasted that money. And I thought, I can't do that. So I told Mrs. Finelli all about what I learned, and we decided, okay, we'll buy an investment property. So I did. I put an offer in. Mrs. Finelli agreed. Our offer was accepted. We bought our first property, and we thought, gosh, I think we made a mistake. That's really not the right one. So I put an offer in on another one, maybe a week later, a few days later. That offer was accepted, and that was the right one until we realized it wasn't the right one, and then we found the right one. Now, this is all within a period of a month. So we ended up buying 3 apartment buildings in 1 month, which was something that, we could not justify. It wouldn't pencil out. No bank in the right mind would lend us that money to buy 3 apartment buildings on our income. Well, we used multiple banks to finance it. We put 10% down on each one. And we had the closing scheduled with one lawyer, but there was like a 9 o'clock, a 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock closing. So by, the 11 o'clock closing, we were in possession of 3 buildings. And now we're in the investment property business. And that's when we learned about how Section 8 housing works. And what it is the government, the federal government, will provide part of the rent that is paid to you by your tenant. Well, one of the buildings had existing tenants. And it was Section 8 housing. And it was great. Until we found, we got more tenants, and we found our own tenants, and praise the Lord, thank you, Jesus. Those were the kind of the comments we would hear from people who wanted to move into our buildings, and they had the deposit, they had the first month's rent, and that was the only good time. And then, the lawn would get tall, and they were responsible for mowing the lawn, but they didn't have a lawnmower, so I'd buy them a lawnmower, and a week later the lawnmower would be gone. And I'd put washers and dryers, in the buildings so that the tenants wouldn't have to pay, the laundromat kind of fees by hauling their laundry, across town, that kind of thing. I thought, wow, I can certainly help them and just charge them whatever it costs me to buy the appliance and spread it out over, a couple of years. So they would pay a little bit extra. I didn't make any money on it, but I wanted them to have a washer and dryer, and so they wouldn't have to, use the public facilities. And then the washer and dryer would be gone. So what I found out was that this Section 8 kind of thing is, you really can't help people that don't want to help themselves. And eventually, I think we bought a total of 11 buildings, and I decided that, at one time I was a landlord, and our tenants converted me from becoming a landlord into a slumlord, because they literally destroyed the properties. They would have their friends would come banging on the screen door, and for some reason the tenant wouldn't answer the door, and the friend would rip off the screen door, or they would run out of money. Yeah, they would run out of money for heat in the winter. They couldn't afford the oil. At the same time, they got the windows open. It's freezing outside. They've got the heat running full blast, and they run out of oil in like 3 weeks. Okay, so what do? Well, naturally, you call the Catholic charity. You call the Catholic Church and say, "Listen, I've got these young children, and we don't have any heat. Can you send over some oil?" And the Catholic Church would send them some, have the oil delivery company bring oil. So, but they still have the windows open. And at the same time, because they ran out of heat, the pipes would freeze, the sewage pipes would freeze in the basement, and they wouldn't tell Vinny that, hey, we got a problem with sewage in the basement. No, because they know that, Vinny might say, have you, yeah. So, I learned about tenants, and I remember calling my wife one day. I had the truck, and I said, "Listen, this was on a weekend. If I'm late for dinner, what I'd like you to do is call the police station and see if I'm there. And because I just may be arrested because I think I need to repair the front door on this apartment building that the tenant hasn't paid the rent on in 3 months, and we can't evict the tenant because the system gives the tenant more and more extensions, and the tenant is, way, way, way behind in rent. The tenant is destroying the property, so I'm going to take the front door, and I'm going to leave. Now, if I'm arrested for riding, through town with the front door, please bail me out. I mean, I've seen it all. I have seen it all. I've seen I got a call from our insurance agent. And so John called me, and I was at work. I was a rehab guy on the evenings and the weekends, ripping out roach-infested kitchens, exterminating the roaches, putting in new kitchen cabinets, new linoleum, new roofs, new windows, sheetrocking, the inside of these buildings, painting them. Plumbing, wiring, everything you could think of, I was doing to rehab these buildings. So I was taking buildings, fixing them up, putting tenants in them, and then the tenants would destroy them. And after a while, I got sick of it. Literally got sick of it, and I decided it was not for me. So our tenants turned me from landlord to slumlord. Now, I understand what it's like, and I understand why some of these slumlords have just given up. Because they're outnumbered. They try to do the right thing. Not all of them, are honorable. But in my case, I wanted our tenants to have a place that I would live in. I wouldn't buy a single property that I wouldn't live in, because I figured, why would I ask someone else to live in some place that I wouldn't live in? So they were all fixed up, and they were kind of nice, but they didn't last very long in the kind of nice. And I remember asking my realtor friend, I said, you know what, tell you what, I'd like to use your services exclusively for finding properties for me, and I'm not going to call other realtors. If you want to do this and you want to be our exclusive realtor, I would like you to be our exclusive realtor. I will be loyal to you if you take care of me. And that's what she did. She was a middle-aged gal, and she was a full-time realtor. She found properties. And I remember saying to her one day, do you have anything in stainless steel? And what I meant by do you have anything in stainless steel is something that the tenants, and I was thinking the interior, complete stainless steel inside of an apartment or a house, because the tenants would destroy anything else. So I wanted something I could take a fire hose and hose out and get ready for the next tenant. But our insurance agent called me one day. And I was working at the bank, and he said, hey, Vinny, did you see the paper, the morning paper? And I said, no, John, no. He said, well, I could have sworn it's your apartment or your townhouse that made the front page. And I said, it can't be. He said, well, it's on fire. I said, no, I can't. I would have heard about it. No. So I got the paper, and sure enough, that was our townhouse that was on fire, and the firemen were there, and smoke was bellowing out of it, and they were able to break the windows and throw the mattresses out the window, and so the tenants had a fire. Now, why did they have a fire? Well, because it was a mother, about a 30-year-old mother. She had a 15-year-old daughter, and her 15-year-old daughter had a daughter, and the mother had a mother. So we had a 45-year-old woman, and a 30-year-old woman, and a 15-year-old girl, and a newborn. 4 generations, all living in this same townhouse. Now, it wasn't supposed to be like that. It was just supposed to be the mother and her boyfriend. Well, the mother and the boyfriend had a domestic dispute. And so the boyfriend, decided that he'll fix that. He just lit her checkbook on fire in the kitchen.
Oh, my gosh.
And threw it in the trash. They liked cooking with lots of grease and oil. And they threw it in the plastic trash container in the kitchen. And it caught on fire, so they put it on the back. Yeah, they put it on the back porch, which I just built, a new deck. And it was right next to the lawnmower and a gas can. So this domestic dispute, with this fire of this checkbook, burned down the townhouse that I just rehabbed.
Just newly renovated townhouse.
So he was arrested for arson. We lost the townhouse. Praise the Lord. And, they were the ones that we put in. They were so delighted. And, I'll tell you a little bit more when we come back. I'll tell you about prison. Tenants in prison. We'll be right back. So, I claim to be a, quote, Section 8 housing, unquote, expert, or expert in what it's like being a landlord. So, to tell you a little bit more about this story, before they burned down the townhouse, in better days, I got a call from the tenant, who was the mother of the 15-year-old, and she called me up and she said, "Vincent, I want to call you. I really love the place." I said, "I know you do. That's great. I'm glad, and I want to stay there." I said, "That's great. That's great. But I'm not going to be able to pay the rent for a month." I said, "Oh, okay, why is that?" "Well, I'm in prison." So how'd that happen? How'd that happen? She said, "Well, my boyfriend, this was before they burned the place down. These were the good days. My boyfriend, he was seeing this other woman on the side, and I caught him. And
oh my gosh.
I ran her over with my van. And then, she was okay, so I backed over her. So she backed over her. and so she got arrested for attempted murder.
Hold on, this is life for these people.
Well, I'm telling you, I know this.
Had a mission in Fitzroy. He had a 32-room mansion in Fitzroy. It had sort of like 4 stories, full of small apartments. And, it had been a rooming house. Probably the building was over 100 years old. And he was working 2 or 3 jobs as a painter and decorator. He was actually a minister of religion, and this was his mission. And he would go home, and he lived at the mission, and he would have to come home after working maybe 18 hours for the day and deal with people's issues. And this is life for them. And if there's anyone here who is in such a situation, you have my utmost sympathy. You really, really do. But what you need to see is you can find a way out, okay? There is a way out for you. There is a future for you. You don't have to live like this forever. But the difference lies with you. What are you going to do? Are you going to be in Section 8 for all eternity, or are you going to somehow figure out a way out? And it's possible, because I'm a single mother. My husband died when my baby was 3 months old, and I had no alternative at that time but to go on welfare. And I was never in commission housing. I was always in private rentals. But, like I said, I've ended up owning my own farm, 20 acres, with a house, off the grid, tanks, water supply, and the only bills I have are my cell phone, my landline, and the internet. That's the only bills I have. There's no water. I control my own water supply. I have my own electricity. It certainly is possible. And, I'm talking about that we actually came from being homeless to organizing this, okay? And so even if somebody is out there living in a tent and you've got maybe a couple of kids with you, you're in the forest living in a tent, okay? We have been there as a family, okay? It was myself, it was my 2 sons and our dog, and a few small belongings and a tent. And then afterwards, we didn't have a tent even. I think actually the tent was a step up. We didn't have a tent, and then I went into the camping shop and bought a tent. That was a step up in the world. It's possible to move on from where you are, even if you're in the most desperate circumstance. But you have to make the decision to go and do it, and not allow life to blow you around, hither and thither.
Mm-hmm. Right. And stop associating with people who can bring you down and associate with people who can bring you up, help you.
That's exactly right.
We'll be right back. We'll be right back. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. And, we've been talking about recovering from hardship, and we talked about Section 8 housing. And one of the things that I wanted to mention, that the reason that I got involved in investing in real estate and pursuing this financial independence was because I had a boss who was absolutely miserable, and I didn't know what else to do, because at the time, Mrs. Finelli and I had a house together, had a mortgage, and we didn't have car payments because we always paid cash for our vehicles. We always bought used vehicles. But the point was that we did have a mortgage note that needed to be paid, $471 a month at the time. And I wanted to be able to keep the house and, if I wanted to, quit my job. And that was the promise of an Al Lowry real estate adventure, that you could become financially independent and quit your job within about 3 years. Well, it didn't work so well for Al Lowry. There's an article that I was looking at written in 1987, a couple years after I attended his seminar, and Al Lowry fell into financial struggles, and he had assets, according to the court papers in this article, the LA Times, LATIMES.com, that Al Lowry owed $3 million. He had assets of $1 million, and the IRS was coming after him for $138,000. So he was in, a tough bind. And so his, and it even says that for $495 each, thousands of people packed hotel ballrooms to hear Lowry's theories on how to get rich investing in real estate with little or no money down. Absolutely true. And I was one of those guys. But I did it. I was able to make it work because I didn't do everything that Al Lowry's instructors said to do. Buy with no money down. I thought that was absolutely crazy. I thought everybody ought to have some skin in the game. So I did not buy any properties with no money down. I bought properties with money down, hard-earned money down. And there's no way I was going to let this whole thing fall apart and lose everything based on individual greed, meaning my individual greed. So I was very careful what I bought, how I bought it. And even though I made mistakes, even though I made lots of mistakes, because I would never buy a property that I wouldn't live in myself, it all worked out. And so ultimately I decided that we got a new mayor in town, and I decided that I didn't think he was going to do a very good job for the city. I thought the city would crumble, and so I dumped all the properties, like almost all at once. And fortunately for us, it worked out. The mayor didn't turn out to be all that good for the city. Housing prices fell, and so we escaped. But the bottom line is, in case you're wondering, yes, I was a real estate investor. Yes, I did buy single-family houses, and I did buy apartment buildings. And yes, it can work if you're in a market where the prices of housing is rising. Now, if it's not rising and you're leveraged and you've got a small down payment, like 10%, and the housing prices are falling, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. But if the housing prices are going up, it's a great way to go. And fortunately for Mrs. Finelli and me, housing prices were going up. And, one of the fallacies in the Al Lowry system was that, if you have to hire people to do things at the going rate, meaning plumbing, roofing, electrical, heating, those kinds of things, replacing windows, replacing walls, replacing kitchens, if you have to pay...
It's going to gut you.
It's going to gut you. You got to do it yourself. And your husband, Archie, he did it the way I did it, right? He was in there hammering and sawing.
And decorator. That was his stock and trade, So he would get a building and he would paint it and decorate it himself and bring it up to something really beautiful, Mm-hmm. And, of course, because he had friends in the building industry, he could sort of get friends to have a look at the wiring and the plumbing or whatever. Yeah. And but that was You know, he wasn't doing it to get rich. He was doing it to get rich in the kingdom of heaven. He was doing it actually to help people because, and he went in with his eyes open because his background was that he came from Glasgow in Scotland, and he came from an area in Glasgow called Mary Hill. And when he was in Glasgow, that's where he learned his trade of being a painter and decorator. And guess what? His job was, when he was in Glasgow, it was painting and decorating. They're called corporation flats in Glasgow, which is basically the Scottish equivalent of Section 8. And you think that what you went through was bad. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. He would go into an apartment and there would be a Pakistani guy there with 500 chickens in his flat. And that's how he was keeping himself. And, he would go, man, oh man, I'm not even bothering with that one. And so he'd just, sign off on it and then just go to the next flat. But he had the compassion to see that this poor guy, he was a recent immigrant. He had no other way of supporting himself, and he obviously wanted to make something better for himself in the world, and so he got 500 chickens, and he had them in battery cages, and so this flat might have been, maybe 100, 150 square feet. So 500 chickens in a 150 or 100 square foot flat apartment. So,
I'm thinking about the flies.
that apparently still goes on to this day in Glasgow.
Must have been
so
millions
he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was getting into. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Must have been millions of flies.
It must have stunk. It really must have stunk. And and then there was another flat, and this one was on the ground floor, of a big, they call them estates in Britain, in Scotland. In the US, you would call them projects. And this particular flat was on the ground floor of the estate or the project, and it had a window to the outside of the building, and then there was something which was, I suppose, supposed to be a children's play area. And back in the day, people used to have big copper kettles, and they would put a fire under the kettle, and they would, they would use that to do their laundry. They would use it to heat water. Maybe if you needed to make a large amount of soup, you had a big family to feed or something, then you would light the kettle and make a soup, and chuck a bunch of beef bones or something in there. This person got one of these copper kettles and filled it with lard, lit the fire underneath it, These kettles had a designated fireplace underneath, but they were using it inside. They lit the kettle full of lard, and you'll never, you know what they were doing. They were making chips in the kettle, and they were selling them to people out their back window. And
when you say chips in the United States,
fries.
Chips would mean potato chips. Are you talking about French fries?
I'm talking about French fries.
Right. Fried potatoes.
They had an entrepreneurial spirit. They were making French fries and selling them in paper packages, which is how they do it in Britain. They sell them in folded paper packages to people. And they had a queue of maybe 100 people lined up outside their window buying packets of chips, buying packets of French fries, for their lunch. Because, a lot of people didn't have cooking facilities at home, and they quite literally lived on French fries in the city. I think that chip vat, as you call them, I think it ended up catching fire, and that was a bit of a problem when that happened, because I don't know if you've ever seen a chip vat catch fire. It's a pretty scary experience. Yeah, you know, I don't know if they have fast food operations in America where they have a deep fryer.
They do. They're called McDonald's, Burger King, Hardee's. Yeah.
You got no small ones anymore, I guess, but you still have them in Australia. They're called chip shops. And but you know, if one of these deep fryers ever catches fire, it's really, really bad. You can kiss the whole restaurant goodbye. But I think that actually that chip vat actually did catch fire because it was not run using electricity or gas. It was actually run using firewood. And you know, but for a while there, you know, Archie would see the queue of people around the outside. But you know, even that is kind of preferable to what you have today in the Section 8 world, because people are not doing that sort of thing. If people were doing that sort of thing, you know, buying a chip machine, you know, getting maybe $1,000 together, going down to an auction house, buying a chip machine, and you know, buying some fat and buying some you know, French fries from a food wholesaler or something, and selling French fries out of their window of their ground floor apartment, yeah, actually that would be contributing to the economy.
Yep, and the government
these days, because you'd get invaded by all the permit patties.
Yep, we'll be right back. So, class, just think about this. You know, lifting yourself up by your bootstraps, that's a great thing. In the United States, it's getting a little tougher because if you think you can open a French fry shop out of your apartment building, you probably wouldn't last till tomorrow before the health department and the blue team were there just shutting you down. I mean, people just wouldn't stand for it. Your neighbors wouldn't stand for it, and you know, that's where we've become in the United States. However, I know that when my dad was growing up, they had a chip shop.
Yeah.
When my dad was growing up, you know, in the 1930s, he was born in the 20s, but in the 30s, right next door to where he was living, there was a chip shop, and it was like I guess a house, maybe a 2-story house, and the first floor of it was this chip shop, fish and chips, and then the second floor is where the family lived. So yes, that kind of thing did go on, and yes, it was viable. It was. As a matter of fact, that chip shop went on for years and years and years, and that's how I know the term chips doesn't mean potato chips. You know, these thin wafers, that you buy in a bag, you know, at the supermarket. You know, you and I were talking, and this was probably well over a year and a half ago. You mentioned a guy's name, Robert Kiyosaki, and so
that's right.
The reason I'm mentioning this is we were talking about Al Lowry, the guy that, you know, I bought his book and course and decided to follow his some of his financial advice, and yes, it worked. It worked for us. I literally, it gave me the courage, and believe it or not, you know, if you look at me now, you'd think, you know, why would this take any courage at all? You know, Vinny would just do it now. Well, there was a time in my life when I was much younger, and, you know, I was a young middle management guy at the bank designing computer systems, and, you know, I had this miserable boss, and what would it take for a person to go to his boss's boss in a large corporation and ask his boss's boss if he could have a different boss because it wasn't working out, you know? And because I had just bought a few buildings, and I thought, you know, I think this is going to work, I then had the courage to go to my boss's boss and say, you know, I love this corporation. I just love it. I want to stay here, but I can't work for that guy, you know?
Yeah.
Could I have a different boss? And and I was probably the first guy to ever do that within the corporation. And the boss said, well, if you can find, someone who will let you work for him, yeah, you can have that transfer. Yeah. That's okay with me. And that's what I did. I went to another guy in telecommunications. I was in charge of a computer system, and I went to the guy in charge of telecommunications. I said, I really like what you do. I've been in meetings with you. I see how you operate. You are really a guy that I would want to work under, with, train with, and do the best I can. And what do you think? And he said, yeah, it's okay with me. So I went to my boss's boss, said, yeah, I found a guy in telecommunications. He wants me to join his team and run telecommunications for the bank. Is that okay? He said, sure. So I got a new boss. But it was all because I had the courage to do that, because I was beginning to be financially independent. And what that really means is working harder for yourself, becoming an entrepreneur that gives you another income stream. And how does that relate to Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, well, he talks about that. He talks about how to do those kinds of things, how to be frugal, how not to waste money, how to build your business. Now, did he go bankrupt? Yeah, he did. Robert Kiyosaki, look it up. Yep, he went well, actually, he didn't. One of his corporations did. And he protected his income stream by having multiple corporations. And that's why I wanted to mention that. So if you happen to look up Robert Kiyosaki, the guy who would teach you how to live frugally, how to compare rich dads and poor dads and pick the one that you want to be. And you don't have to be a dad. You can just be, a mom. You can be single. You can be anybody. But following his advice really does work. It really does. But one of his corporations went bankrupt, not him. He still is worth a lot of money. So I just wanted to share that little story. Gwyneth, any comments before we go into this break? 5 seconds.
Okay. I'd just like to talk when we get back about code enforcement.
Okay, we'll be right back. Gwyneth's with us. Gwyneth, you want to talk about code enforcement?
Yes. Okay. I want to speak to anybody out there who is any sort of code enforcer, okay? Whether you are a policeman or work for a municipality or somebody from the SPCA or whoever, okay? Health inspector, whatever. And I need to, tell you a few home truths. The corporation that you work for, okay, is operating a racketeering scam. And you need to, from now on, be very, very careful in how you treat people, because I can see a trend developing on the horizon, and this is a tactic, actually, that the code enforcers themselves developed. But now there's a lot of ordinary people are beginning to wake up and are using their own weapon against them. Okay? And what that is if you are a code enforcer, basically you are the pointy end of an extortion racket. You need to be aware of that. And you need to have a good, long, hard think about if you are happy to do that. And if you are happy to do that, you need to do that with the awareness that you are going to have RICO suits filed against you in the court of law. And people who are just after trying to make an independent living for themselves need to learn how to self-represent in a courtroom, and they need to start filing these RICO suits. And would you like to explain, Vincent, for the class exactly what a RICO suit is?
Well, I can, but I was going to tell a story first. But do you want to do that?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Basically, racketeering is not allowed, and it hasn't been allowed, and there's been very strong common law and also Supreme Court precedents dating back to the 1920s and 1930s. So what they're doing is totally unlawful. And the emerging edge of this is the permit patty phenomenon, where these code enforcers don't actually have our sympathy anymore, and they need to be aware that they they no longer have our sympathy. We now see them for who they are. And, they have been sowing for very many years, destroying the economy and making our lives hell. And they are going to reap what they have sown, meaning that they have sued us into oblivion economically. They're going to start getting sued into oblivion. Okay, I think that's about all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what is, and you spell RICO, class, R-I-C-O. And it stands for the racketeer influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. And that's what Guineith is talking about. And according to the news, this was about 5 years ago. I was doing a couple broadcasts. I was doing a morning broadcast and an afternoon broadcast right out of Missouri. And I read this article early in the morning. I would read the news early in the morning, actually maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day. And I still do. And I was reading this article about this homeowner in Orlando, Florida. And what I read, I'm paraphrasing, I'm going by memory, that they were being fined $500 a day for growing vegetables in their front yard.
Oh, man.
Yeah, $500 a day. So I saw this, and I hit the roof. I was livid, because what they were trying to, they weren't running a business out of their front yard. They were growing vegetables to eat. And I was thinking about my grandparents. I've been in my grandparents' house, both of them, and they grew food. My mother's grandmother had the entire backyard. The entire backyard was a garden, every square inch except for a patio. And over the patio was a grapevine, a huge grapevine where they had table grapes and they made wine. So they had a vineyard, they had a couple fruit trees, and they had a garden, and they grew tomatoes and squash and everything you could think of for their own consumption. Because they grew up, my parents grew up during the Depression, my mom's family and my dad's family. So if they wanted to eat...
If you didn't do that during the Depression, you starved.
That's right. That's right. So as I was reading this article about this Orlando, Florida, and Orlando is where Disney is, right? Orlando, Florida, these people were being punished by the city code enforcing types for growing a garden. So I was livid. So I picked up the phone. I looked up the city government's phone number, and I said I wanted to talk to the code enforcement people. They said, well, the investigator, here's the investigator's extension. And I left a message. I said, hi, I'm Vincent Finelli. I'm an investigative radio broadcaster. And I'm doing a story on code enforcement about this family. And I delineated who they were and the fine and what I read. And I said, I'd like to hear your story, your side. And I said that I'm going on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going on the air, and I'm going to be talking about it with or without your side. If you'd like to have your side mentioned, you're going to need to call me before I go on the air. Otherwise, I'm going to go with what I know. And so here's what happened. They decided, well, I gave out the code enforcement person's phone number on the air. I said, here's what they're doing. Here's their number. They called the farmhouse and they begged me to stop. Please stop. We are reviewing the code. The fine has stopped. We're not fining these people. The fine has gone away. There is no more $500 a day fine. We've stopped the fine. It's all gone away. We are now meeting and we are reviewing the code, and we're going to change the code. We're not going to do this. We're not going to beat these people up. And so I was thinking, when you said code enforcement, we went to the break, and I just typed in code enforcement, Orlando, Florida. Here's what I have. OrlandoSentinel.com. Orlando prunes its proposed front yard garden rules. This is an article, August 7th, 2013. It says, after an embarrassing battle with a couple of College Park gardeners, Orlando officials have drawn up new rules governing homeowners who want to plant carrots and cucumbers in their front yard. And it says that they can. And it goes on to say, and I'm kind of pleased about this part, it says, where is this? It talks about, somewhere in this article, I lost it because it keeps moving, but it talks about that the media went after them, and that's exactly right. The media went after them. But when we go after them by giving out the phone numbers of the individuals, not the main number, the individuals who are the code enforcers. And we made their lives uncomfortable because we exposed who they were by their name and their cell phone numbers. And it worked. And we've done this several times. And it absolutely
does work.
Okay.
I want to mention.
Yep.
When I'm talking about these issues, and I mention the names of our friendly neighbourhood police officers on air, that's why I do it. Not because I want any harm to come to them, far be it from them, but, that anything should happen to them, but they need to stop being anonymous. People need to start seeing these people for who they are, okay? Because for many, many years, they have made our lives hell. So when people like, Brad Hyatt, Peter Halpin, that's Halpin, by the way, and Michael Harper and such like, who are all police officers around here who at one time or another have trespassed on my land and caused me a great deal of distress and who are likely to get sued into the future if they don't stop. That's the reason why I name them, is because they need to stop being anonymous, because it's the anonymity. That's why bank robbers wear a mask. That's
where cops wear a mask. Cops wear masks too.
Cops wear sunglasses. Oh, by the way, Michael Harper and Peter Halpin, when they did a property invasion the other day that I think I mentioned last week, they weren't wearing their badges. Now, that's a big-time code violation from Victoria Police's own rules. They're supposed to wear their badges on their shirts. They were not wearing their badges. But I recognize Peter Halpin because he's my personal Javert, I say. Anyone who's ever read or seen or watched the movie of Les Miserables, they will know about the policeman who spends his whole life pursuing this ex-con, despite the fact that the ex-con made good and actually spent the rest of his life helping people, But Javert was determined to destroy him. And so when I see a police officer like that, I call them Javert. They probably don't have any idea what I'm talking about, but, I don't think their education extends to classics of literature somehow.
The sentence that I was looking for in this article in the OrlandoSentinel.com is, the perception of big government cracking down on veggies drew national media attention and a gardener revolt.
Woo-hoo.
That's what it takes.
Yay.
That's what the article says. Doesn't say Vinny, but that's what happened. We'll be right back.
Yeah.
Guineith, you mentioned the police not wearing their badge numbers. I was pulled over many years ago. I still was in the Midwest. I was pulled over by a cop, and license and registration. I gave him the license and registration, and I told him I was armed. He said, "I don't care about that." So he went back to his patrol car, came back and gave me a ticket for speeding. And there was no discussion. He just handed me this ticket. And I looked at him, and I said, "I've got your name. I've got your badge number. Got a couple questions. What were you doing on private property, lights off, in the dark, in the rain, sniping with your radar gun? What were you doing?" And he told me it was policy. And I asked him whose policy, and he told me that, it was the sergeant's policy. So I said, okay, what's his name? I got his name. And I said, you got the wrong guy. I was going up a hill. 3 cars were coming down the hill. We're all bunched together. And you seem to think I was the guy that was speeding. You got the wrong guy. It wasn't me. And I've got out-of-state license plates because we gave our daughter a car, and after about 5 years, she gave it back to me. And the tags are still good through the end of the month, at which time I'm going to register the vehicle and
change them
in Missouri. And so I understand that it's easy pickings. You pick on an out-of-state driver, they're not going to come to court, they're not going to challenge you. But I live here. I live just down the road, and I happen to be a broadcaster on the largest AM radio station in the area. Covers almost every county in Missouri. And I'm going to be talking about you, your name, your badge number, and what you've been doing until the disposition of this ticket. He couldn't believe what he was hearing.
Yep.
And do you know that my ticket has never appeared? It's gone. It's missing. It's gone missing.
Yep.
Nowhere to be found. Because what he was doing is he was on private property sniping, and I'm certain without the owner's permission.
Yeah.
Kind of like what the blue team does when they sit in like a used car lot, and there's a whole bunch of cars all lined up in a used car lot, and there's like an empty slot, and they occupy that, and they've got their radar gun, and they're sniping. Are they protecting and serving? Well, they'd probably say, yeah, we're protecting you all from speeders. Yeah. How about helping us instead of sniping? So that's their tactic. And we need to expose them. And whenever I see a cop sniping, and if Mrs. Finelli is with me, I say, okay, as soon as we're done with the bank, as soon as we're done banking, I'm going to stop off and ask this guy what he's doing. And by the time I get back, he's gone. He's picked another sniper's perch. Yep.
Yeah,
but that's what I do.
Longer than about 15 minutes at a time, because people go away and they are beginning to come back and challenge them.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that the cops are doing in our neck of the woods is what they do is they go to a bar, and I've mentioned this on the air a couple times, maybe a few. They'll go to a bar and they'll put a mark on the tire of someone at the bar, and then they'll go down the road, because when you come out of the bar, you either turn left or you turn right. Okay, so they set up shop and they look for that stripe, and when they see that stripe on the tire, they know that's the guy. That's the guy. He was at the bar. Pull him over.
They do something similar around here. They'll park just up the road from the country pub, and they know when closing time is. The country pub has responded by putting free camping for all of its clients. There you
go. And that's the mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. Yeah. Guineith, it's delightful broadcasting with you. Hey, thanks for staying up late.
I'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Guineith Isaacs. Link on the website, usaprepares.com, the instructors tab.